Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Elvis Nationwide Radio Network. And today, we're going to learn about something very special that Elvis and the Colonel did together. Something that had been set up before Elvis had the accident that put the golf ball sized lump on his head that we spent so many episodes talking about. We're moving away from that event, although we may come back to look at it again if new evidence surfaces. We're basically left with a big, we don't really even know if Priscilla was there. She says she was there. And yet other people, she's not in any of their accounts. Hi, Keith. Hi, Linda. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Marion. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We're going to start off with a song. And this is about all the trailers that Elvis is having installed at the Circle G right now. It's called House on Wheels. Hi, Pat. Thank you for being here.
He rode past Green Acres with a glimmer in his eye. Said, wouldn't it be something if my folks could live nearby? 12 trailers later, they were rolling down the lane. Concrete dreams and carpet floors, love poured out like rain. He bought one for Grandma, parked it close to his own. Said, you've got 2 homes now, no need to be alone. One for his daddy, one for his boys. He built a little kingdom, not just for show but joy. They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't stealing wheels, it was love made bold. A house on wheels with a heart of gold. The county said no, the neighbors raised Cain, but Bernie worked midnight through thunder and rain. They poured the pads, ran the lines, made it right, while Elvis rode a rising sun at first morning light. Some said he was foolish, some said he was grand, but he just wanted laughter to echo through the land. He sat on the floor near tears in his eyes, said, why do they fight me when I'm trying to rise? They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't stealing wheels, it was love made bold. The house on wheels with a heart of gold. They called it trailer trash, she called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to get peace to his mama
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to be hearing about Elvis's nationwide radio network. Now on screen, we can see a saddle. And this is a saddle for a horse. But this is a special saddle. This is Elvis Presley's saddle. The one that he used the most often, according to the information I've been able to find. So I believe, and I can't be certain, but I think this is the saddle that Elvis got his saddle sores on, that Dr. Nick came and treated him for. And that's how he met Dr. Nick. I think it's connected to this saddle. If it's not, it's still a saddle that Elvis used. He sat on this saddle on top of a horse, rode it around. This saddle was on Rising Sun, Elvis's personal horse. So I thought you guys might like to see this. Marion says that's a beautiful saddle. It is. It's a very lovely saddle. And we know that Elvis has connections and history with saddleries in his area, places that are owned and have been owned by family, not his family, but by the families that ran these businesses. And that their sons and daughters have gone forward and opened other leatherworking shops. And Elvis has bought things from these people in these different shops. So this most likely came from one of them. Most likely made specifically for Elvis. Or perhaps customized for him. May have just been on show within in the showroom. But a really integral part of all the stories that we've been telling about this period. And of course, all the guys would have had a saddle something like this, because he bought them all a saddle. And he took Larry Geller and his whole family to one of these stores, one of these family-owned shops. And they would have bought the saddle and all the stuff that they needed. Now, he might have already had a saddle for that horse, but they bought all the other leather stuff that they needed. And Elvis had to have bought that saddle that Larry had on his horse somewhere, even if they didn't buy it that day. And they would have all been something similar to this, because Elvis was very into this Western theme, and this is a very Western theme saddle. And Linda's asking, was it designed for Elvis? I don't know specifically, I just know that it was his. And that's the thing about all of these artifacts, is you see them and they're described as something like Elvis's saddle. And this one had a description like it was the most used saddle that he had. So I don't think they're claiming that it's the only saddle that he had. But when these artifacts go up, these people who write these descriptions, they don't really know about Elvis's history. So they don't really understand how this saddle fits into Elvis's history and how important it potentially could be. So whether it's the exact saddle that Elvis sat on when he got the saddle sores, or it's one that he used alternatively to that one. Maybe he changed saddles because of those saddle sores. I don't know. This one has to stand in for all of those saddles because it's the only one I know about. Now we're back to the calendar. And that saddle, assuming it's the one that gave him the sores, well, that's connected to Sunday, the 26th of February, which you can see at the very top left corner of the calendar. It's the first square. And that's the day Elvis met Dr. Nick. And then we jump down 2 squares to Sunday, the 12th. And that's the day after the meeting where the colonel laid down the law. It's most likely the day of the meeting. Now, a couple of pieces of information came in through the Hillbilly Cat grapevine, which is the comment section. And some of our loyal viewers, people who have been watching a lot of these episodes, well, one of them jumped in and said that they own one of the Donna Lewis diary books. And Donna Lewis lived at the Circle G. Her father worked at the Circle G. He was one of the men who wore an EP on his shirt. She says that she kept a diary. So this isn't just her saying. She kept a diary of events of the period, that's a contemporary document of the period. So it's not it's not Donna remembering what happened. Now, she surely went through and cleaned up the diary, edited it somewhat, made it ready for publication when it was published as a book. But supposedly, these are the memories, or not the memories, but what she wrote in the moment, which is as absolutely close as we could ever possibly get to being there. And her diary entry indicates that both Priscilla and Joe Smith left Graceland the night of the 11th, along with Vernon, to catch a plane to go to California, which would indicate Priscilla wasn't in California. Indicates Priscilla was at Graceland. Now, this isn't a statement about where Priscilla was on the morning of the 9th, which is when Priscilla says Elvis fell, she heard him, she ran in. Then she called Joe Esposito, and Joe called the colonel, and the colonel called the doctor, and then it all went on from there. So it's possible she was there the morning of the 9th, and she went back to Graceland, and then they all together got on a plane the night of the 11th and came to California, so they'd be there on the 12th. Although the meeting had supposedly happened on the 11th. It's very confusing. So we don't really have an exact answer on this. Another commenter mentioned Jerry Schilling in his memories of the period. And they'd also mentioned another item that ran contrary to some of these things that are said. So I'm looking for all of that so I can verify all of that. But there's still questions out there about what exactly happened during this period. It's not dead yet, but we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the 19th, which is the following Sunday. So we started at the 26th, which was the first Sunday on the board. And now we've moved down 3 squares. And we're on Sunday the 19th. And this is the day that Elvis and the Colonel had set up something special. Here we can see a newspaper article that's titled Elvis Sets Up Network for Palm Sunday Music. And I'm going to read this article to you. But before I read that one, I want to read you another article that I don't have a picture of. And this one is from Billboard magazine. Very important periodical within the record industry, the recorded music industry. And this article is from March 18th, 1967. So it's from Saturday, the day before. And it says Elvis special Palm Sunday nationwide half-hour Easter radio program. Elvis featuring sacred songs from his new RCA Victor sacred album, How Great Thou Art. More than 300 radio stations in 50 states will broadcast a special 30-minute program of sacred music from Elvis Presley's RCA Victor album, How Great Thou Art. The Palm Sunday program is contained on a 12-inch special album, which includes a spot announcement for the National Red Cross. The program, which is being sponsored by Presley and Colonel Parker, his manager, also has an open time period for local charity plugs. Trade and consumer ads by Victor on the album will support the saturation programming. Ad mats of 600 lines on the new album with space for local copy are being made available for local and regional advertising to tie in with the Palm Sunday broadcasts. Billboard magazine is telling us that there's going to be a special radio program on Palm Sunday, which is the 19th, next day. It will be broadcast by more than 300 radio stations. Now, it's not going to be broadcast all at the same time. Every radio station's going to broadcast it when they want on Sunday. They're all receiving a record, a 12-inch LP, basically, a record, double-sided. And it's got all the songs from the album. Plus, it's already got an ad on there for the Red Cross. And it's got time built into the program that the local stations can put in other advertisements. And the part about ad mats of 600 lines on the new album, I believe this is referring to either the liner sleeve of the album or some part of the packaging. And then like local businesses could buy a spot and get something printed on there, similar to like menus that you may see in local diners. And they're sponsored by all the local businesses, and they're usually very supportive of the local sports teams. That's what I think they're talking about. I'm not positive about that. But they're definitely going to have this program on this day. Now, a lot of sources say the Colonel bought time on all of these stations. In other words, he paid money for all of these stations to play this. I don't believe that's true at all. It looks to me like the way this is set up is the Colonel, he talked RCA into producing these records that they're sending to all of the radio stations. And he's giving the radio stations the ability to play music that in a programmed way that'll connect to this nationwide event, so they would probably want to be part of that. And he's given them time to do their own advertising. So it's kind of like he's almost given them a free half hour of entertainment, that all they have to do is play the record and have a DJ that says a couple of things. And somebody's going to pay them for the advertising that happens for the local advertising. So this is all a win-win for the radio station. It's a loss for RCA, but their thought is they'll sell more of these records. I'm sure that's what the Colonel is helping them to believe. But why is Elvis part of this? Is this just to sell more records? So we need to think about the journey that Elvis has been on. Elvis recorded this album after a few years of this spiritual quest that he's been on. He's been feeling like something's missing. Larry Geller seems to feel like he was searching for something outside of Christianity. That's what I get out of Larry's books. If you've read Larry's books, you might get something else. So if so, and you don't agree with that, feel free to put it in the chat, put it in the comments. All opinions are welcome here. Make sure you like, that you subscribe, that you tell everybody you know that loves Elvis all about Hillbilly Cat history, so they can join us here for more of these deep dives. But why is Elvis recording a gospel album at all? Surely that's not what the Colonel had in mind for fulfilling the RCA contract. Now, this does help to fulfill the RCA contract. He needs to provide so many songs, so many albums. I believe he has free range to provide whatever he wants, though. But if it doesn't end up being a good seller, that may become limited in future contracts. And he's recording this prior to January, the end of January, when we know that in the end of January 1967, he's going to have a new contract with RCA that's guaranteed for 13 years. So this seems to be like one of the last records under the old contract. So they must have been fairly happy with the performance that he put into this record, because they've signed him for another 13 years before the record's really been released, because it gets released here in March. And that's kind of why this is timed together, because obviously the record company would believe this is amazing marketing for the record. But what's actually happening here is all of Elvis's gospel songs from this record are being released free into the airwaves. Now you've got to listen to some ads, so it's like YouTube. If you watch for free, there's ads involved. That's what radio was. It was the YouTube of its time. Only not just anybody could get onto the radio. YouTube's much better that way. We can all get onto YouTube with an account and start broadcasting, or at least putting out videos. they had to want to play you on the radio, and it costs money to somebody to play you. So Elvis is going to boost everyone's watches or visibility numbers, views for the day, because of course it's Elvis. People are going to listen to this. That's why the radio stations are wanting to put this out. Elvis is wanting to put this out because it's the word of God. This is important. This is something much more important than the movies that he's been involved in. This is part of whatever it is that he's questing for. Whatever the spiritual journey is that he's on, making this album was part of it, and getting it out to where people hear it, that's the other part. It's not good enough to make the album. He's got to have it. It's got to be out. People have to hear it, and he doesn't want it to be gate kept by the price of admission, by being forced to buy the record. Hi, Chillin' in Canada. Thank you so much for coming. And Chillin' is saying that it must have been a great first listen for the execs, as the album was a Grammy winner. That's a great point. And I think the other thing we could take from that is that it was a great listen for Colonel Parker. He's fully supportive of this project. It's him that really lines up all the logistics. They're not really making any money off of this. It might boost sales, but maybe it won't. I think in this instance, he agrees with Elvis that this purpose is important. And so they put effort into it. And effort equals money. So they're not paying directly for it, because the Colonel's a lot smarter than that, but he is putting his effort and time, and that's worth a lot. But the record executives, they're into it as well, because I believe when they listened to this, many of them would have been of Christian faith. And so it was probably important to them as well to get this kind of music out there. Plus, they'd invested all this money into it, and I'm sure that drove them to some extent as well. Now let's read what this article says by Vernon Scott in Hollywood. And Elvis Presley and his wily brain trust, Colonel Tom Parker, have conceived a promotion stunt unique in radio history. So right away, Vernon Scott tells us, this hasn't ever been done before. This network thing that Elvis has going, no one's ever done this. Not on an artist level. Suddenly, there's a nationwide Elvis network. Just popped up one Sunday. And it's all about praising Jesus. So Vernon Scott goes on. A one-day Elvis Presley religious network. On Palm Sunday, March 19th, exactly 276 stations in 50 states will broadcast a 30-minute program of Elvis singing hymns. Among the numbers are such as How Great Thou Art, In the Garden, Somebody Bigger Than You and I, Stand By Me, If the Lord Wasn't Walking by My Side, and Where Could I Go But to the Lord. Elvis will go heavy in the so-called Bible Belt with as many as a half dozen stations in a single city. So Vernon Scott is telling us some of these cities, 6 stations in the city are going to play the same broadcast. You're going to have different commercials, but it's going to be the same broadcast. He says it's less than 300 stations. It's 276. He puts an exact number on it. So it's not quite what Billboard claimed, at least not according to Vernon Scott. And Vernon goes on and says, okay, so what's the angle? What is Elvis selling besides religion? He and the Colonel, strictly an honorary title, are selling Presley's newest album, How Great Thou Art. Colonel Parker bought the time on each individual station. So Vernon Scott says, I'm totally wrong. I think the Colonel talked RCA into printing the records and the radio stations into playing the records. But Vernon says there's money that's exchanged hands. That Colonel bought time on each individual station. And then he quotes the Colonel. So he could be right. The Colonel says we couldn't have this kind of saturation if we bought time on all 3 networks. And the great part is that the show will be heard on different stations at different times. So this quote, what it says is we couldn't have bought this kind of saturation on the 3 television networks if we'd bought time on all 3 television networks. Now, it's funny that Vernon Scott does not quote the Colonel as to the payment of time that's being used on each radio station. He declares that the Colonel bought the time on each individual station, but the quote is, we could not have bought this time on the 3 networks and got the same coverage, which Vernon takes to mean the Colonel bought the time on the radio stations, but that's not what the Colonel said. He just says, if we bought the time on the TV stations, wouldn't have been as good as what I got. But he doesn't say he bought it. Colonel is a master of working these guys in the press. And I think this guy fell for it, but that's just me. You guys let me know what you think. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. I know you're up early. Vernon Scott points out that Elvis will be heard singing only. And he quotes the Colonel again, who says, I'm selling a singer, not a talker. Colonel sure had a way with words. I'm selling a singer, not a talker. Then Vernon Scott goes on and says there will be 2 or 3 brief plugs for the singer's new album, but no mention will be made of his movies. And it will all be very soft sell. And Vernon Scott says that's because it's a religious day, the Colonel will be giving away 3 minutes of time and money on the half-hour show to local stations for the purpose of pitching a favorite local charity. He has also allowed time for a National Red Cross plug. So I think it is significant that the Colonel has worked in the National Red Cross and local charities. The Vernon Scott is saying that's because it's a religious day, but the Colonel didn't have to do that. Elvis didn't have to do that. But as they're pushing out the Word of God, the Scripture, through the gospel songs, they also include the National Red Cross, a national charity, and local charities. And they're basically requiring 3 minutes a time, that you pitch your local charity for 3 minutes. Or multiple local charities, however many you want in that 3 minutes. But it's not for sale for merchants to use. Vernon Scott goes on, there are side effects anticipated from the Presley Network too. First, it will let the public know that yes, Elvis is still alive and in better voice than ever. That's an odd statement. Elvis is putting out 3 movies a year. Who would think that Elvis is not alive? And he sings in all the movies, so they know that his voice is good too. That seems like kind of a jab, but I don't know. And then Vernon goes on. Other than his movies, news of Elvis and his activities are as guarded as the movements of Howard Hughes. Long before Elvis passed away, they were linking Elvis to Howard Hughes, who was an incredibly rich man, who was also a recluse at the end of his life, had a lot of strange habits, refused to see anybody in person, probably had seen enough people to last him a lifetime. To be honest, he'd seen a lot of people. He was nearly as famous as Elvis in his day. But the press loves to link Elvis to Howard Hughes. Elvis is nothing like Howard Hughes, but they love to link him to him. Vernon Scott goes on, it is part of the image the singer and or the colonel have painstakingly built in the last decade. Plainly, it is a successful formula, and 1,000 rock and roll singers have come and gone. Even the Beatles' popularity has waned, but not Elvis. His movies and albums still sell fantastically well. And that's what he and the colonel have had in mind all along. So even though Vernon Scott, the journalist here, pokes a little fun at the colonel and his strategies and maybe Elvis not appearing in public as much and all in the movies, a lot of the standard kind of things that we hear people poke fun at the colonel and Elvis about, he does admit the colonel's strategy seems to be the correct one, because Elvis has outlasted everybody and he's still incredibly popular. He's still number one. He's still the king. And Luann says that her older sister loved the Beatles. I like the Beatles too. But they didn't last anywhere near as long as Elvis. They really barely lasted a decade. Vernon Scott goes on. Well, actually, that was the end of Vernon Scott's article. But what's really of note here, or at least interesting, is that there's an embedded article inside this article that you can see on the screen. And it says, "Blast That Blasted TV." And it's from Montville, New Jersey. And the article says, it must have been a Western because when Charles Smith decided to play television critic, he went to the quick draw. Smith was charged with disorderly conduct Tuesday. Police said he drilled his television set with a single shot from a .38 caliber pistol while his wife and son were watching the program. So I just want to point out that 10 years from now, from 1967, over the course of the next decade, there are going to be articles printed about Elvis shooting TVs. If you go to Graceland right now, you can, in the area across from Graceland, across the street where the shopping center used to be, where there's now museums, there is a television set in there that Elvis shot. You can see it. And it's not the only one he shot. He shot multiple televisions, put a bullet in them. And it was seen as very eccentric, and it was used as an example of how eccentric Elvis was. This man would just shoot a television. And yet here we are 10 years before. In 1967, and in the middle of an Elvis article about Elvis spreading the word of God, there is this article about another man that has shot his television. Before any of these stories about Elvis shooting one comes out. So this shooting televisions, Elvis didn't invent that. And it wasn't a huge deal before. It's a very small, little, insignificant story in the paper. They put it in there because it's amusing. But that's all it is. It's amusing. It's not a story in and of itself. But later, it'll be headlines because Elvis did it. And actually, this man here who shot his TV, it cost him a lot more. Because he would have had a lot less money than Elvis. And Marion says that Elvis sang many beautiful songs in his movies, and his movies were very successful, in her opinion. And you are correct. They were, at least financially, very successful. When they talk about an Elvis movie that wasn't financially successful, if they say that about a movie today, that means a movie probably did not make as much money as it cost to make and market the movie. But when they say it about an Elvis movie, it means it didn't have as much profit as they wanted it to. It had profit. People made money. Nobody lost any money. Money was made. It was in the green. They just didn't get as much as they'd hoped that they'd get, that they'd planned on getting. That's not the same as a movie not doing financially well. But that's also Elvis competing with the one person he can never truly compete with, and that's himself. And Linda says that she likes the Beatles, but not as much as Elvis. And that her older brother likes the Beatles a lot. Luann says that her sister also did love Elvis Presley. Hi, Jen. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And that Luann was 7 in 1967 and Linda Curtis was 16 in the same year. Which was the same age as Luann's sister. So they were probably listening to the same music, both loving Elvis, both listening to the Beatles. Were you guys listening to the Doors? I'm pretty sure the Doors were out by 67, right? Luann says that she remembers so clearly that her sister had posters all over her bedroom wall. She had the records on, and she would hold her in her arms dancing to the Beatles. So she probably had posters of the four guys of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. On screen now, we can see a special brochure. This is one page of a 4-page brochure. Don't have the other 3 pages, so I don't know what they look like. But you can see it says Elvis Special Palm Sunday Nationwide Half-Hour Easter Radio Program Elvis, featuring sacred songs from his new RCA Victor Sacred album, How Great Thou Art. I'm not really sure what it says there. I think this is a listing of all the stations that they knew for sure were going to play this by the time they printed this. And then it says that Elvis is now appearing in the Hal Wallis production, Easy Come, Easy Go, a Paramount picture at your favorite theater. Happy Easter, Elvis and the Colonel. So I think this would have been something that came with the record that went to the radio station. And it would have explained to them that they're part of all these other radio stations, and probably had other marketing and instruction material on the inside. And Chillin in Canada says they were a kid and not into the Doors. And Linda Curtis says it was a great time for music, and yes, she was listening to the Doors. And Luann says that all four of the Beatles all over her walls. And that's how she knows the Beatles, was through her sister. That's a good way to learn them. This is a picture of Elvis with a bunch of people I cannot name, not at this moment, but all of these people. These are the people that recorded How Great Thou Art with Elvis. My guess is that the female in the picture was one of the vocalists. I'm kind of guessing that the man in the white coat is as well. Don't really know. I don't recognize any of the faces. But this was Elvis at the recording session for How Great Thou Art in 1966. So I thought you guys might be interested in that picture, even though we don't know, not yet, who these people are. If you know, be sure to throw it into the comments or the chat. This is the album, How Great Thou Art, as sung by Elvis. So this is the album cover you would have seen in the stores that would have been available after you heard this broadcast on March 19th. You could have gone and picked up this album. And there's no telling how many people the broadcast and this album reached. And how many people took Elvis's advice through the album and their lives changed forever. Because Elvis and the Colonel thought it was important to get this message out there. They didn't have to set up this radio station, this radio nationwide broadcast thing. This was something that had never been done, completely unproven, hasn't really been done since that I know of. So it doesn't seem like it was super successful from a sales platform. I don't really know. Can't say. But I don't believe the Colonel used it again. So it was a one-time, extremely special event. And it's not for any secular work that Elvis did. This was sacred work. And it was a sacred broadcast. I think this was very important to him. And I think it's linked directly to seeing the cross on the circle G. When he saw that cross, I think it linked him directly back to this, the making of this album, and now the release of this album in this month, as well as this nationwide broadcast. He's bought the Circle G the month before this happens, but he already knew it was coming. This is all part of the same direction. He's walking the path he's supposed to walk. At least that's got to be the way he's seeing it. And it's not an easy path because people keep telling him, can't do this, can't do that. No, I don't want this gift. I don't want that gift. People keep trying to block him. You can't be here right now. You've got to be somewhere else making money for other people. There's contractual obligations. A lot of stuff in his way, just like a pilgrim's progress. He's finally found the path, and every time he tries to take a step forward, there's something blocking him. But he keeps pushing forward. And he's going to make it back to the ranch. But right now, he's still off at clam bake. And his head's hurting. And this is something that the DJs, the radio stations would have got. This tells them what's on side one, what's on side two, where to put the announcements. So you can see side one, announcer, 16 seconds. For 16 seconds, he gets to announce, hey, we got this new Elvis record, we're going to play it, blah, blah. And then How Great Thou Art plays. And then In the Garden. And then the announcer has 30 seconds. And it's all planned out, mapped out to make it easy. And this is just an example of the Colonel's logistics. This is an RCA. He probably had RCA print these. But my guess is he set these up. He and maybe Trudy Forsher, but probably somebody in his office typed this out. Perhaps an RCA secretary. But my feeling is that the Colonel was connected directly to this piece of paper. And that his planning, his strategy, it's reflected here. And I think Luann's trying to tell us that she's not sure if her sister actually loved Elvis, and she'll never know. Is that what you're trying to say, Luann? And that you wonder if your sister did love Elvis? Because you never got a chance to ask her. You never thought to ask her. And Linda says that she's forgotten who the people are in that picture, but that she once knew. Well, that's good. Then we'll be able to figure that out. And Luann says, yes, that's what she was trying to say. It's like that about a lot of things in life, isn't it? You start to wonder, when you lose someone, what they thought about this or that. And it's a good lesson about regret, and that's what Donna Presley talks a lot about on her channel. And she has certain rules for living life so that she does not feel regret. She's very wise about it, so if you've ever wanted to hear Donna talk about, or any of the wisdom that she lets forth, I would definitely visit her channel. And here we can see the actual record that was sent to the radio stations to play this program, this special Palm Sunday religious program. And Chillin in Canada says that AI says Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, devised the radio program as an innovative way to publicize the album. With Elvis's public profile having declined during his run of Hollywood film projects, the album had received little media attention, so Parker took a different approach. That sounds like AI. My issue with that statement that AI is making is that of all the albums that Elvis had ever released, why would the Colonel choose this one to promote in this way? It was well known that gospel albums were lower sellers. I mean, you just knew that going in. Like, when you make a dramatic movie like Elvis wanted to, it was known going in, it's probably going to get a far smaller audience. So no matter what promotions you put into this particular gospel album, because it's gospel, it already has a limited audience. So I don't, my belief, and I have no way to prove it, but this was an important project to Elvis. And everything connected to this project was important to Elvis. The Colonel surely did not say to Elvis, sure would be a great time to put a religious record out. I mean, I don't think that's what the Colonel said. I could be wrong. Maybe he did. Maybe he saw it as the perfect time. Colonel doesn't seem like a overly religious person to me, though. I'm not saying that the Colonel wasn't religious or that religion wasn't important to him, but you don't really hear anything about the Colonel connected to religion other than like this event. So it seems to me that Elvis had to be driving this in some manner, that it couldn't just be Colonel Parker. Again, I could be wrong. And if it was the Colonel only, must have not worked great because he didn't do it again. And here we can see a close-up of side one of the record. Special Palm Sunday programming. SP 33461. I think that 33 means it's 33 and a third record. The speed that it runs at, 33 RPM. And here we can see side two. And this was a not for sale album for DJs only. And as was stated earlier, Elvis will win a Grammy Award for this album. So this album, I believe, has to be very personally important to Elvis. And he put a lot into it because it was so personally important to him. And they did this special thing, which I think has to be him. Could be wrong. And of all of his work, this one wins the first Grammy. Which, again, I think is a reflection of what he put into it. But it's also a recognition I think of the importance of the work. That even the Grammy, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, has recognized how important Elvis's message and mission in this particular record was. And also that he once again broke genre boundaries. Here's the king of rock and roll is winning a Grammy for a sacred album. I don't really know of anybody else who's ever done this. I know of Christian artists who have gone mainstream. I think there's a few mainstream artists who have gone Christian. It's usually the other way around. But I don't really know anyone. Maybe Dolly Parton? Maybe Dolly Parton, maybe Loretta Lynn. I can't really remember if they sang much gospel. So I'm not sure. But I think that this was a really important project to Elvis. And Unfortunately, we've now hit our hour. And so we've got to part once again. But we're going to go out on a song, and I'm going to send you out on Circle G Dreams. And when we get back together, we'll talk more about the Circle G. You guys keep on taking care of business.
I drew a line in the dirt, said this land could be yours. 1 acre each, a house, a porch, a door. I saw the light in their eyes, like stars in the dust. But the paper stayed blank, and the dream gathered rust. I wasn't cash poor, I was rich in belief, trying to carve out a kingdom beneath cotton clouds and the Mississippi sun. But every time I reached, the dream came undone. Don't you forget what I tried to make, a home for the hearts I refused to forsake. They called it a whim, they called it a waste, but I saw a commune, not just empty space. Don't you forget me when the fences arise, when the ranch house fades and the silence lies. I gave you the down payment, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. They said zoning laws, they said legal red tape, but I saw a chapel in every landscape, a replica of Graceland, a circle of trust. But the curl was bust, and the dream turned to dust. I signed the checks, I made the calls, watched the trailers roll in like prayer storms. But Vernon's face, tight as a gate, held back the flood of what I tried to create. Don't you forget what I tried to give, a place where my people could finally live. They called it a farm, they called it a phase, but I saw a future in the ranch's haze. Don't you forget me when the lights go out, when the house plans fade and the voices doubt. I gave you the down payment, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand.